Little video on periodization. It's a hot topic, obviously, in strength conditioning and training. What the heck is it? So, just a quick video on periodization. Number one, all it is periodized training. That's it. It's just I'm going to train like this, and then I'm going to train like this, then I'm going to train like this. There's debates about periodization, whether a mixed model or block models, or linear periodization, or non-linear periodization, or undulating periodization. It goes on and on. Here's the deal with periodization. If you just want a quick and dirty, I'll go over some different models as we go into these videos, but here's a quick and dirty. Again, it's just periods of training. It's just a way to organize what you're doing. It's a plan. That's all it is. It's nothing mystical, magical. It's just a plan. Now, how you organize the plan, of course, is going to be built upon where you're going. So oftentimes when you periodize something, you're going somewhere, whether it's some sort of competition or a weight loss goal or whatever it is. You're going to work backwards from that goal. And so we use terms like macrocycle to indicate how long the total cycle is. Mesocycles are typically weeks. Microcycles are typically days or the week that you're training. So 1 week to a day is a microcycle. A mesocycle could be like 4 weeks long. And a macro would be, let's say you're only going to train 12 weeks for the whole year, or you're an Olympic athlete, and so that'd be a quadrennial, or you're going to train 4 years. That's what the bottom line is. It's just a way to organize your training in such a way that makes it so it's manageable. And so, don't let that word kind of throw you off. You can periodize your nutrition. I'm a diet coach for Renaissance periodization. That just means that you can periodize your diet, right? I mean, you can periodize within a day when you use your carbs. You can periodize within a training cycle when you don't need as many carbs. If you're an endurance athlete, there may be times you need more carbs and less carbs, and so on and so forth. So it's just a way of modulating some sort of stimulus, whether that's training or diet. Basic concepts of periodization are, the typical linear model, which is high volume, low intensity when we talk about training. And that could be, even in conditioning to some degree of higher volume training. It might feel like a higher intensity because if you're doing work to rest ratio stuff where, you're a 1-to-1 ratio, 1 minute on, 1 minute off or something like that, that feels pretty intense, but you have more of a quantity type movement. So you're pulling a lot of volume. In the weight room, you could be doing higher rep sets or more sets of moderate reps. The point is that you're accumulating, sometimes those are buzzwords now we use, we're accumulating fatigue. We're also accumulating training stimulus in order to see adaptation. And then as you go along, you move to a strength cycle, so you shed some of that fatigue through a deload period or week. Move into the strength where you're going to keep the fatigue manageable, just a little bit, if you will, whatever that quantifiable amount is. Smaller than you had in the first cycle, and now you're moving towards more quality movement. If you're an athlete that's a field court sport athlete, you might start sprinting towards the end of the cycle as you start to get the special preparatory or the peaking cycle, which is about 2 to 3 weeks into a major meet. I think a big mistake a lot of times that's made in strength conditioning is that we peak for the start of a camp, but who cares? Why not peak for this, an important game, or even this is a wildly unpopular thought, I'm sure. But if you're a football team and you lose the first 2 non-conference games, in a lot of ways, unless you're playing for a national championship in college, who cares? Like if you're in high school, who cares if you lose those first few games? If you're still getting bigger and stronger as you head into your regional games, then you taper for those, and those are the games you want to win anyway. So it's harder to do when you have a one or multi-peak type of situation to do linear periodization, but it can be done. With an adequate maintenance phase. And in maintenance, you keep the intensity high and then keep the volume very low. Volume builds, volume kills. Okay? And so early on in the linear cycle, volume builds, and then you start pulling it back a little bit and increasing the intensity because you're wielding the sword a little bit more carefully. And then as you get to a peaking cycle, you pull the volume down and increase the intensity up through maintenance. That's a typical linear cycle. Not a bad cycle. I kind of fought the Rage Against the Machine for a while there, and linear, it's so simple, blah, blah. Turns out it's probably a pretty good way to do things. If you look at a block cycle, which is just intensified times of training. So like I'm just going to do strength and very little anything else. Less mixed model type of stuff. Focused training. A lot of it's still linear. So what I'm getting at, even if you do undulating, so you mix up the reps. So you're doing 3 sets of 12 this week, and you're doing 3 sets of 6 next week, and then you're doing 3 sets of 10, and the research literature doesn't seem to support that that's effective. Who knows, though? I mean, the research, it's hard to study these programs. There's so many variables going on. The bottom line is there a progressive overload? That's what I'm getting at. When you get into these models and you start, and people argue over these all the time, oh, I'm this, and this. Is there a linear period, or is there a progressive overload to it? Who is the person? If it's somebody who's very, well trained, it's probably going to need higher stimulus. So mixed model might be more difficult. If somebody is like a high school, junior high athlete, or you're just starting out, a mixed model might be appropriate, and in fact, it's probably good for them. So I don't think, like anything, it depends. I don't think either model is wrong or right. You just have to learn how to use them, and that's where the trick comes. So anyway, just a little periodization primer, and then I'll talk about some of these models people argue over in a subsequent video here about different models and how to use them. All right, that's all for now.